Welcome to day two, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again. We're excited to have you. We're excited to hop into how to structure your job search today. Of course, in the actual email that you received today, we actually started with an affirmation. And we really wanted to do that because this is something that we think will help you gather your energy and make sure you're going into this calm, cool, and collected. So I want to start by actually restating that affirmation to you because I think it's such a good one. It's something that we really should say to ourselves more often. So let's hop into that. You can say this with me too. I have value, I am worthy, and I am making room for the right opportunity to come into my life. I always feel like saying affirmations 3 times really makes it hit for me.
Yes, get it
Because
in there, get it in your brain and your consciousness.
yes, yes. Make
Love
sure
that.
that it resonates for you. Let it simmer in. And I really wanted to start with this affirmation so that we can be conscious of how much time and energy it will save us to actually structure our job search and go into this excited about structuring our job search. We're actually going to break this down into stages for you. So you are in a place where you know exactly how to get started and you can see the beginning to the end of exactly what you'll be doing in your job search. And we're going to walk through that with you today.
Yeah, love that. Let me pop open and we'll do screen share, have everybody here. So this is a little snippet of the email in the Google Docs. You're all are viewing it in an actual email, but I love this this kind of tweet that talks about like how you measure progress in moments and steps. And we've talked about that piece, and affirmations are part of that too, right? Because it's about yeah, really sort of seeing the steps as you take them, feeling your progress, getting momentum, and feeling good. And I think whenever as we get ready to kind of take a look through the stages, whenever you find yourself being a little overwhelmed, which is going to happen for sure, it's part of the job search process. I'm sure it's happened for a lot of folks already. Just kind of come back to this moment, right? And if you need to, open that day two email and kind of come back to the affirmation, um, that you just did, Jasmine, and come back to the smaller steps and that moment of like, okay, I got this. I've already done a lot. I'm already doing a lot. I can take these steps. So yeah, let's take a look at the structure doc. This is a big doc, and it is really, in some ways, to your point, Jasmine, kind of the HQ or the heart of your whole job search, right? And so you can make a copy of this, pretty easily up there. File, make a copy. If you want to download a Word copy and drop it on your desktop, whatever is easiest for each person. But the goal with this is to really help folks, kind of get their job search structured. And I think one other thing I'll say kind of before we get into the meat and bones of it too is it's also about kind of making sure there are stages so that, as mentioned, kind of this first section at the top, like, so that once you've achieved a stage, like if you've really got your materials dialed in and you've really got your positioning figured out and you know what roles you're going for, you've got lots of clarity and you're getting phone calls, then yeah, your materials are in good shape, right? You mastered that stage. You've done well at that kind of application, materials and application stage. If not, then you might need to go back and make adjustments. And so that's sort of the goal of this staging. So let's sort of talk through some of the stages and habits, and kind of go from there, if that sounds good.
Awesome. Yes. Let's do it. I'll give a quick overview of some of the things we'll jump into in this. We're getting into how you can actually find job opportunities. And of course, if you're in Black Remote She, we have it set up so that you can know if that job is fully remote, hybrid, whatever you're looking for in terms of the type of remote work, the salary range that the job is offering. We have salary transparency on the Black Remote She website, so you'll always have a salary there. You won't have to play the guessing game. But another thing that we'll jump into within the How to Structure Your Job Search doc, there's actually a list of salary databases so that you can know exactly what salary ranges you should be looking for based on the type of positions you're looking for. So you know the average range in your industry. And we'll also jump into a list of screening tips, which resembles the list that I actually use to vet opportunities that are coming to Black Remote She and through Black Remote She. So you'll learn how to do that for yourself as well, because there's always more that you can do, especially if you're finding jobs outside of the Black Remote She website and you're trying to find spaces that are safe and get to know what type of jobs are being shared on other platforms like we share here with LinkedIn, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, all of these other job platforms, because you should be using more than just Black Remote She. Make sure that you're looking through how to really screen those jobs that you're looking at on other platforms.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, and this great overview, and this first stage that we're peeking at in the doc right now is finding opportunities. It's sort of about creating some repeatable habits, and in this stage, you're trying to grab a bunch of opportunities and then put them in your queue essentially, so you're ready to roll. So you can use the automated stuff. That's Google Alerts. You can use LinkedIn, Indeed, ZipRecruiter. Obviously, keep an eye on the newsletter on Saturdays. You can start to look at and peek at niche communities like Facebook groups and Slack channels are a great way to go. I also remind people to do this step, which is sort of reaching out to people that or feel pretty good about, and making sure that your people search is turned on, right? If you're looking for a remote project manager role, you want the people around you that you trust and care about, or past colleagues that you had a good relationship with. You want to let them know so they can keep an eye out for you. That turning on the people alerts is, I think, something that people forget, and it's really helpful because sometimes your friends, your family, your network doesn't know what you're looking for, right? Or maybe you used to do something and you kind of shifted your gears to a different role. So those things are all kind of good habits to have in place. And so the outcome of stage one should be putting this last checkbox here, putting opportunities into that apply to stage. And we're going to give you all a template tomorrow that's like a tracker, so don't worry about that yet. That's coming in day 3, but the goal is to kind of get to that stage. So yeah. And then Jasmine, why don't you talk us through stage 2? You were the expert at this. I know we've talked about this so many times over the last couple of years, but so you've got that opportunity. How do you walk us through how you really look for it, and we'll kind of look at the screening list as well.
Yes, when you're looking at job opportunities, like I said, especially on other platforms, because I do go through this process with Black Remote She, make sure you're creating a list of red flags. And a part of that can come into when you're really rereading job descriptions, you'll learn more about the company. When you're looking at Glassdoor and Insight Voices, like our partnership, you'll be able to actually see what are other people saying about this employer, what are other people's experiences with their hiring processes, what are their experiences actually being in the work culture. These are the platforms and things that you can use to actually find those patterns and see if folks are actually staying true to their inclusive work environment. Make sure that you create a list of your own negotiables and your non-negotiables. So if there are certain things that you're looking for, rereading the job description, looking through that employer's website, and being able to look at their reviews will give you an idea of the type of work culture that you could be entering, the type of folks that you'll be interviewing with. It'll give you a lot of information about what you're about to experience when getting involved with this employer once you submit an application. And even through looking through the application process, if you're seeing that at this point in 2022, they're asking for employer history and you just submitted your resume and that's something that you feel is a waste of time and energy for you, make sure to just move on. This is your opportunity to make those lists of things that you don't want to go through in your job search, and set it up so that it's easy for you.
Yeah, I love that. And, just to add a tiny detail, one thing that I always share with folks is, you mentioned it, I think in the screening checklist here, everyone's going to have different experiences, and some things that are, huge red flag are going to be like, yeah, I could deal with that for other people. But I always tell people, I'm like, in general, 2 to 3 yellow flags equals a red flag, right? So just kind of do the math, clock that situation, know for yourself, wow, okay, I could live with maybe that yellow flag or that challenge potentially, but if it adds up to a non-negotiable for you, then it's a good idea to kind of just move that opportunity off the table and make room and time and space to find something else. So.
Yes, yes. And also think about the things that you're really looking forward to. What are the things that you're excited about with that organization, and create that list of green flags as well. Make a note on things that you see, especially if they're transparently publicly sharing DEI data and they're letting you know exactly what they're doing to create an inclusive culture. and the things that you're looking forward to and the benefits that's being offered, especially gender affirming healthcare, being able to actually have technology stipends and things that can help you throughout the year with that job beyond your salary and will also increase your quality of life. Those are all really important things to take note of as you're going through the process.
Yeah, love that. And I think you and I have talked about this too, Jasmine. Like, this is a pro tip, right? In an extra little nugget of insight in organizations where like you're going to be the minority, right? They maybe only 15% of their staff are Black or Indigenous or Asian Pacific Islander, whatever it might be. You can kind of look to see how quiet or how sort of visible their employees are. And I mean, I'm sure everybody kind of clocks that a little bit, right? Like, oh yeah, they're putting up their Black employees on their social media for Black History Month. They're putting up their Hispanic and Latina employees for, Hispanic Heritage Month. Like, yeah, that's always something you got to watch for. But also, like, if every single person at the org who is Black or Indigenous is totally silent on the internet, that is a thing to kind of like ask yourself, I wonder why that is, right? So things like those signals like that can also be really helpful for you to kind of like think about that red flag, green flag mode.
Yes, yes. And also think about how are they supporting you at that organization? Do they have ERG groups and things where you can actually know there's racial audit assessments happening throughout the year? I'm able to actually share my voice on what I feel would be helpful at this organization if I were there. And as Joe said, if the other Black and brown folks on that team are not speaking, are not being visible, that's often a sign that maybe there's something that they're afraid to share or don't have anything to share, which can be a good or a bad sign. So make sure you're paying attention to that too when you're looking online.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Good advice. Yeah. So that's screening. And, you'll kind of make a copy of this doc and you'll kind of get your own, rhythm for doing this checklist. Right. And we didn't make it like super prescriptive for that reason, because we know each person's experience is going to vary, but use this to help you kind of templatize that approach. The first few times you do it, it'll take a little bit of time, but once you kind of get that template down for yourself in your job search to kind of accelerate your job search, it's going to get easier and faster. So
Yes, yes. And I shared this earlier, but salary databases are also really great, just so you have an idea of the type of equitable salaries that are out there for your industry. So you know when you're looking at positions, if it aligns, if it looks a little low, if it looks like it's even higher, those are definitely things to watch out for as well.
yep, love that. Great point. So stage 3, which we're going to kind of get into in some of the next couple of emails. So you don't need to memorize this right away, but we're again trying to kind of, as Jasmine, you were mentioning, we're trying to kind of help people prime and get ready for this. We're going to kind of go through the steps a little more directly. And like, how do you, once you get that role, you've done the screening, you kind of say, okay, this seems like a good opportunity. I'm feeling good about it. It's past my checklist. There's some steps that you can take to kind of regularly like position yourself for applying. And that's kind of what stage 3 is about, right? It's about kind of getting your materials dialed in for that role, light customization, and then doing a little bit of light networking around the role and the team if you can. It's not always possible to do a really deep dive, but it never hurts to find people who work there and kind of like send them a quick note and ask them about their experience. And then there's a few extra tips for kind of how to make sure that you're applying, in a useful and meaningful way. And then I think one thing I was going to ask you about, Jasmine, too, because you do a really good job of this, is like, the kind of the customizing of the cover letter, or even just if it's an outreach message, if it doesn't require a cover letter, like, would you talk a little bit, we're going to get into that more, but would you talk a little bit about kind of what you recommend for people there?
Yeah, I think it's especially with the cover letter. And even if you don't see that this is required, I feel like it's just a really good opportunity for you to share your experience and why you're excited about working with the employer. Let them see your personality here, make it personal. They read things that look like a robot wrote it all the time. So you really want to make sure that this is your opportunity to stand out and share why you're passionate about working with them, especially if they're mission aligned. This is the opportunity for you to really tap into your softness and make that shown in your cover letter as well. They want to see that you're human too. And that is often received really well. And I hear a lot from recruiters of people saying, like, I got a really good cover letter, and then they came in for the interview and it felt like a different person, or we went through an exercise and it felt like a different person. So make sure you're being genuine and authentic here. Make sure that you're tapping into yourself. It will come off very obvious if someone else wrote your cover letter and it wasn't you. Because if you're in an interview, you want to make sure you're showing the same energy. So make sure you're feeling connected when you're writing your cover letter, and that you're showing up in the interview as the same person.
Yep. And we've got some examples of cover letters and, kind of resumes and some of those materials. So that's coming up in the next few days as well, in the materials piece. So stage 4 is a big one. It's all about interview prep. I won't go too deep on this because the checklist here is pretty detailed. And then there is also, in I think it's day 4 or day 5, the email is going to really go in depth into how to prep for interviews and how to templatize the process, et cetera. But one thing I would say for sure is, in stage 4, your goal is to really kind of like break it down into smaller pieces. So this is the steps model that we were talking about earlier. There's different kinds of interviews. So there's like the standard 30-minute phone screen. This is almost always with a recruiter or someone from HR. Occasionally it's the hiring manager. There are bigger, fuller interviews. Sometimes you'll get like a group interview or a panel or a presentation. Sometimes you'll get like an assignment type interview where it's not as common for, depends on the role, but if you're like a coder or something like that, you might have to do a little coding challenge on the spot, things like that. And so there are different kinds of interviews to kind of prep for. And the biggest thing is really, I think going back to what you were just saying, Jasmine, is like to really do your homework and kind of like absorb the interview process in a way that feels natural. And so, what I always tell people is like, you create that interview prep doc, template for yourself. You kind of write out your answers, you edit them, you practice them out loud until they feel comfortable. You change the wording. Oh, wow, that sounds weird when I said out loud. That's not me. Let me change that. It's okay to kind of take your time to do that homework, but there's a little bit of process involved for interview prep because you do want to get to that that day of the interview and feel comfy talking about your work and your experiences and, why you're kind of applying for this particular job, team, organization, et cetera. So those are some kind of pro tips for that. Just really put your practice and your homework in because this is a pretty big stage. What are your thoughts, Jasmine? Other things that people should be thinking about when they're kind of going into that stage?
Yeah, I feel like this is a really good time to talk about the networking. Because when you're in a position where you're trying to be natural and, like Joe said, talking out loud and actually expressing the things that you're writing down to see how it comes off when you say it out loud. When you're networking with other people, that's an opportunity for you to ask them like, hey, can I run through like kind of like a mock interview with you, especially if it's someone in your industry that actually has the experience of interviewing other folks and being able to tell when something feels inauthentic or it doesn't feel natural when you're talking with them. So I think this is an opportunity to tap into your tribe, tap into your network, and see who can actually do those mock interviews with you as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, one of the questions I often ask people in the job search is if they're struggling to get through the interview stage, because this is a big stage, let's be real, it's a hard one to kind of work through. I ask people like, if you were to compare 2 of your interviews, like how different are the answers? And they should be pretty similar, right? You should kind of have your prep in place where you're like, oh, great. Well, let me share an example or a story that illustrates, a time when I had to have a big challenge or I ran into a big obstacle and I had to kind of fix or solve it. Very common question, right? Tell us about a time when you had to deal with a challenge. What did you do? Behavioral type questions. You should really be answering those pretty similarly every time. You don't have to write a script and read it, but you should have your kind of your sort of hash marks like, okay, first I did step 1, step 2, step 3. You should feel really comfortable having practiced those, so that in your interviews, you're giving pretty similar answers. And one, that's just so you feel good and you're prepared. And 2, you might have a sequence of interviews, 2 or 3 interviews where you're asked similar questions and you just want to be consistent, right? You want to communicate the same experiences consistently so that they, when they walk away at the end of the interview process, they're like, oh, wow, Jasmine or Joe was great. We really got a sense for how they think about work and the kinds of experiences they have. Yeah, I like that too. I remember, they told this story or talked about that experience. Like that consistency is really helpful. And, I think in the interview phase, you want to get to that place of being as consistent as you can. And, if your interview is completely different every time, then that's a kind of a sign, okay, I need to go back and do some homework a little bit and work on this stage some more realistically, So.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot just from, being in business and actually going through the process of learning what it means to be a founder in a different space, having come from doing other work. And I was told a lot that, when you learn how to talk about yourself, it will completely transform your experience and being able to actually go through processes of interviews. Because even as a business owner, there are interviews I've done to try to get funding, and it makes a difference when you know how to talk about yourself and know how to talk about exactly what you're trying to do. And it'll come off in authentic, and it'll come off very natural when you get used to talking about yourself. And if you have portfolio examples, work samples to pull from, and you have an experience to relate to those work samples, that's a really good example of a way that you can really tie things in so that it doesn't feel forced. It's very natural. Like when I worked on this project, this was a very real experience that I went through. And here's how I was able to process through getting this work done despite these challenges. It'll show a lot about how you go through the process of getting projects done. And I just think that's something that worked really well for me. So I always try to share that with people too.
Yeah, love that. Great. I think that's a great insight. Yeah. And, like you were saying earlier, it's about kind of getting it natural and feeling comfortable. And it needs to sound like you.
Yeah.
And that just takes time to and prep, like your goal is to tailor the conversation in a way that shows, who you are and what you bring to the table. And, it just takes practice. I don't know anybody who's just like instantly able to kind of explain everything that they do. And, especially in the short time periods, right? 30 minutes, 60 minutes. That's why you do practice, is because it's about kind of tailoring it. So, yeah. Yeah. So sort of stage 5 and stage 6 are the roundups. 5, I always recommend. I don't think a lot of people do this, to be really honest with you. I think sometimes people kind of do this a little bit, but this is a pro level, pro tip thing to do. Stage 5, you're in the interview process, you're kind of going through the experience, and just take the time to do your homework, right? Keep looking for signals, keep looking to reach out to people around that role, keep going back to your list and saying, oh, I really like this was a green flag, didn't like that was a red flag, that was a yellow flag, I'm not sure. Keep doing that stuff, keep that conversation going about compensation and benefits, keep learning about how they operate, what the management style is of the hiring manager. Like in this stage, you're really just kind of like keeping the conversation going, because you can learn a lot in that process. So, yeah. Yeah. Did I miss anything? Any thoughts on that? This is sort of a mini stage a little bit.
Yeah, I think this is a good moment. This is a lot of information we're throwing at y'all. But take your time with these stages, even if there's one stage that you go through a little more than the next. There will be some that you have to revisit and some that you spend a little more time on, but take your
Great
time with
point.
these stages. It will feel like a lot. We know the job search is a lot, but we're helping you structure this. I think it'll really change your experience of being able to feel more confident into processing through your job search when you break these down into these stages and really work through these.
Yeah, love that. Yeah, great reminder. And then you've got that, same thing, that last stage, negotiating the offer, like very, very similar thing, like really take the time to set out the steps. You can always ask for more information from the recruiter or the hiring manager. Okay, great, we're getting to final interviews. What are the next steps in the process? It's always okay to clarify that stuff so that you can kind of line everything up together. Yeah, and negotiating is hard. It's not a natural skill that most of us kind of just arrive with. So we'll walk you through that process when we get down there to, I think it's day 6 or day 7. So.
Yes, and I really want to restate this very last bullet we have here in stage 6. Always ask for what you want. The worst that can happen is you don't get it, but always, always, always ask for what you want.
Yeah, love that. Never hurts. And I think that's, in some ways, that exemplifies the way you've built Backroom as a community, is being in that space, right? Like, yeah, I matter. My life has value. My work has value. I have worth. I'm going to ask for what I want and for what I need. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And we're giving you salary databases and things for you to be knowledgeable about what your industry typically has in terms of salary. But when you have that information, especially, you're going in with an informed ask. And I think that that makes a difference.
Yeah. Love that. So that's day 2. This is the HQ doc. This is the structure. There's a lot here to your point. But we did kind of want to walk through and add a little extra context that we hope is helpful to kind of, help you think about this whole process. And, some of these things may be new and you're just going to practice this for the first time. Some of these things you may have done and you're kind of going to get to that intermediate or expert level. The goal is to just really help you kind of break it down into steps, make sure that, on those days and occasions when you're feeling down, that you really understand, like, yeah, I can kind of go back to different steps and really put some time in, and also give myself some credit for doing the work, right? Taking care of it, because let's be real, having, being in the job search is like a job. In many cases, is a full-time job, as you're seeing from a lot of the steps here. And so it's important to break it down and just, be appreciative of all the work that you're putting into. I think that helps a lot.
Yes, yes. Give appreciation to yourself.
Yeah. I think that's all we got. Anything else? Any closing thoughts for folks as we close out day 2?
Yeah, I think that's it. At the bottom, we have some extra tools and tips for you. There are a lot of things that, like just said, you may recognize and other things that you may not. So make sure you take advantage of these things. Look through them, see what works for you. Some things may not, but add things to your own list. When you make a copy of this or you save it as a Word doc, add things to the list. If you're finding things, add it in. This is yours to work with and to make your own so that it feels authentic to you. So work with it as whatever feels natural for you. And thank you for joining us again.
Yeah, love that. Day 2. All right, y'all. So good to see you. We'll see you for day 3.